At that moment, I thought, wow, that's amazing. Of course, a lab test is a good thing. But when it comes to human consciousness, we're wired in such a way that a lab test is just a number and a piece of paper to us. But when you can actually feel it yourself, see the result, it's a completely different experience. Because I want to live in a world where cities can breathe more freely, where the air is cleaner, and where people are encouraged to use all of their cognitive abilities to the fullest extent. And if you don't make conscious choices every day, if you don't work on yourself, then nothing will work out for sure. I told all my acquaintances, all my friends about this. She was like, of course, I would really tell everyone. I would be so proud of you. To bring light into life, the technologies of light, a person has to shine themselves. Otherwise, there's no other way to work in this field.
In a world where we talk more and more about technology, but less and less about what we breathe, a person appears who connects science and nature. She doesn't just create innovations, she restores the true power of light. Her technology purifies air, water, and surfaces without filters, without chemicals, only thanks to light. Today we are joined by the founder of EraOxygen, a company that makes the air cleaner and cities more vibrant. A woman who sees not just energy and light, but life itself. Maria, good afternoon. I'm glad to welcome you.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad you invited me and truly happy to see you.
Maria, could you please tell us, when did you first realize that air is not just something we breathe, but that it actually means something more?
Oh, that's a very interesting and touching story. At that time, I was still living in Russia, and a well-known voice and speech coach came to our city, Voronezh. His name is Vitaly Tikhomirov, and by the way, he's from St. Petersburg. And in order to speak beautifully, the first thing you need to do is develop your lungs and diaphragm. And that's exactly what we were doing all day long. The first day of the training, all we did was work out our breathing. And I remember that in the evening after this training, I went outside and I realized that for the first time, I had started to breathe, really breathe. It was as if, when a newborn's lungs open up, that's exactly how it felt, like my lungs had opened up. I finally started to breathe. I'm walking through the city streets, approaching a fountain, thinking how wonderful it would be if everyone could breathe like this. It's truly such a gift. How absolutely great it would be if someone else could really feel this too. And then I remember, somewhere in the fragments of my memory, that someone once told me about concrete that can actually clean the air. I was like, wow, that's cool. If only I could create that kind of concrete. I'd probably make sports grounds where people could do yoga and at the same time breathe clean air. I think, well, that's awesome. I'm sitting on a bench looking at the fountain, thinking about this. And at that moment, I met a chemist who said, okay, that's a cool technology. We immediately started talking about it. He was like, yeah, I know what that is. He told me I can develop it for you, and he develops all the formulas for photocatalytic concrete that cleans the air for me. And that's how it all started. Then came collaborations with universities, trial samples, certification, GOST standards, and the whole main process. But that moment, it will always stay in my memory as the moment that laid the foundation for my true reasons, my true desires for why I'm doing this.
Maria, you could have chosen any business field. Why specifically technology, innovation, ecology, and photocatalysis?
That's a very important question because everyone should really know their why. If you know why you're doing something, everything else falls into place. Yes, I have 2 higher education degrees. My first degree is in engineering, and my second is in economics, specifically in the economics of managing a manufacturing enterprise. I have an MBA and I have extensive experience in management and leadership. I could have found myself in almost any field because experienced managers, good managers are needed everywhere. But why ecology specifically? The answer is very simple. Because I want to live in a world where cities can truly breathe, where people make full use of all their incredible cognitive abilities, talents, and potential to the fullest extent possible. Where there are minimal amounts of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and no allergens. That is a completely different level of life. And in the end, I am simply a mother who has a daughter, and I want her to live in such a new world where she doesn't just survive after yet another epidemic and all sorts of cataclysms, but this comfortable environment for development and growth was there from the start, which in itself creates the foundation for a completely different level of growth. That's why I do it.
What was the first day like when you actually realized this technology and created EraOxygen? What exactly did you feel at that moment?
When at the company where I was employed in Russia, we produced a trial batch of paving slabs that specifically contained titanium dioxide inside, which has those very photoactive properties. We did this to pass laboratory tests and sent this trial batch to the warehouse for storage. A year goes by, and then the warehouse inventory begins. And suddenly, the warehouse manager, in some forgotten corner of the warehouse, finds these pallets with the tiles. They had been sitting for a year on the grounds of an industrial facility where sand is mined, where cement is regularly dumped, right in the middle of the Black Earth region, where there's always dust and dirt. That's basically normal life there, because minerals are being extracted and are constantly in the air. So when we found those two pellets, I was amazed. They were just perfectly white. They had cleaned themselves. All this time, for the whole year, next to them were pallets that had been made at the same time, on the same dates, but they weren't photocatalytic. They were just regular concrete. And they were all just dirty, exactly as you'd expect them to be after being stored for that long. At that moment, I thought, wow, that's impressive. A laboratory test is, of course, good, but the way we humans are wired, a lab test is just a number and a piece of paper to us. But when you can actually feel it yourself, see the result with your own eyes, it's a completely different experience. And later, we even started having tours at our facilities. I used to give tours in that godforsaken warehouse. We didn't touch those pallets, so we could show what was standing around and nearby, in what condition, so that people could really assess the effectiveness. And that was truly the biggest wow effect.
That's great. You really have such a calm, confident energy about you. Tell me, is that simply your nature or is it the result of going through crises?
I thought we need photocatalysis. After all, it's a technology about how sunlight, or light in general, affects our lives. To bring light into life, to bring light technologies to people, a person has to shine themselves. Otherwise, it just won't work in this field. This isn't an ordinary field, such as shuffling papers or balancing accounts and so on. In this field, that's why a person can truly shine on their own, but only someone who has made a conscious choice to shine, in particular. Of course, this requires discipline. It requires working on yourself. Very intense and rigorous work. Of course, when I moved to the Emirates, this year I found myself traveling by myself with my young daughter, carrying only 2 suitcases. In those 2 suitcases, I had brought photocatalytic concrete with me because I simply couldn't leave it behind in Russia. I didn't know anything about the new country, its laws, or even where I was supposed to go. I didn't have any acquaintances or friends there. Absolutely no one at all. And when you move to a new country, it's actually considered, in terms of stress level, after losing a loved one, it's the next highest level of stress. So, a change, new country, new environment, new life, and on top of that, plus promoting a new innovative technology that doesn't exist in this country. It's definitely a colossal burden, first and foremost, a psychological one. And if you don't make conscious choices every day, if you don't work on yourself, then nothing will work out for sure.
So these are the forced crises that we really always have to actually overcome.
They are only necessary so that we become stronger, draw conclusions, and move forward.
What does clean air mean to you? Is it still really about technology or is it perhaps about freedom, inner freedom?
If someone were to ask me, just as an ordinary, everyday person, what clean, fresh air truly means to me, I would close my eyes and immediately imagine myself standing somewhere high up on the top of a majestic mountain, or standing in the middle of a vast, endless pine forest, or standing in a wide, open field of colorful, fragrant flowers. In any case, it's always some vast, expansive space filled with the vibrant, invigorating energy of life and radiant light. And that's what clean air is, when you breathe it in deeply and feel, yes, life is truly beautiful.
Ultimately, it's inner freedom.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you saw concrete clean itself in the sun. What did you feel at that moment? What thoughts did you have? That very sample of concrete that you brought with you to the Emirates? I started conducting experiments on it myself at home. I smeared it with oil. just regular vegetable oil. Then I smeared it with cherry because that's a very strong pigment, and basically it's almost impossible to wash it off white concrete. I poured hot coffee over this sample, making sure it was fully covered. So to remove the oil, it just took 3 hours in the sun. To get rid of the stain, the deep purple cherry stain, it took 12 hours in the sun. To remove the coffee, it took 24 hours because coffee is a liquid after all. It seeps into the pores and it needs more time for the chemical reaction. I thought, wow, I need to tell the whole world about this right away. I told all my acquaintances, all my friends about it, but when they saw the pictures, they were like, wow, what is this? What kind of innovation is this? What kind of technology is this?
Maria, I know you're an entrepreneur with a lot of experience. Please tell us, how did your journey in entrepreneurship begin? Did it start with an experiment, or maybe with an idea? Or maybe with solving some issue or problem?
Well, yes, for me in general. I have extensive experience in construction. I've been working in the construction field for 15 years. I managed a very large concrete products manufacturing company in Russia. I am currently the president of the industry union for paving and landscaping of the Russian Federation. And not just Russia, but all the EAEU countries. Our union includes companies from Kazakhstan and Belarus are also part of our union. Whenever we do something, we do it for a reason. What makes a successful person different from an unsuccessful one? A successful person knows what they want and why they are doing something. It's the same with entrepreneurship. When you run a business or work somewhere, you understand why you are doing it. You are either improving people's lives or influencing them in some way. Or you do it for some personal goals, including financial ones.
Was there ever a moment in your life when you wanted to give up everything? And if there was, what held you back? What stopped you from doing it?
Oh, that happened many times. Just in the Emirates alone, my own, I almost threw my beloved beton cube into the sea 3 times. But I realized that I love it more than anything else, and I just didn't have the resolve to go through with it. I was like, well, okay, let whatever happens happen. But what motivates me the most is probably my daughter. There was a time when I thought, maybe I'm doing all this for nothing. Maybe I'm wasting my time on this. But this is a new technology. It's very hard to promote, very hard to explain, and not everyone understands it. Everything takes a long time, and after all, you need something to live on, to maintain a certain standard. Some comfort for me, for my daughter, some security. One time my daughter asked me, Mom, what is this technology? I said, well, it's like this and like that. Would you be proud, my dear daughter, if I actually made this happen and we lived in a completely different city in another country where, well, it's also a space, but of a completely different quality where you can truly breathe freely, walk down the street and enjoy fresh, clean air, where at home you have wonderful, pristine alpine air? She said, of course, I would definitely tell everyone. I would be so proud of you. I'd even really make a poster about you at school. About you, I'd tell all the little kids. Let me create videos about you on Likey, telling everyone how you do all this for everyone to see. Mom, you're amazing. I'm already proud of you. And that's what truly motivates me personally and tells me I need to keep going.
So that our children can be proud of us. And one day they'll express their gratitude to us for this air. For the clean air.
Absolutely. She says, when I grow up, I'll figure out this technology and I'll work with you on it. That's so wonderful, so cool.
Since we're on the topic of kids, then tell me, in simple words, like you would explain to a child or to anyone who isn't a chemist or a physicist, what is photocatalysis and how does it work? How does it clean?
It's actually a pretty simple chemical reaction. Titanium dioxide, which is the basis of this technology, is a catalyst. It is activated by sunlight, ultraviolet light, and can even be activated by indoor lighting if certain substances are added, by doping it, for example. When it is activated, it actually activates oxygen in the process. We have oxygen molecules as well as hydrogen peroxide, both of which then interact with our organic compounds in the system. So photocatalysis works with any organic matter. So whether it's air pollution, viruses, or dirt on a surface, it doesn't matter. The main thing to remember is that it has to be organic. Oxygen interacts with the pollutant molecule, essentially breaking the very bonds in these molecules. and the pollutant is simply and completely destroyed. As a result, we end up with water and oxygen. And the pollutants that were there, they just become like dust. They appear on the surface and then they get washed away with water. That's it. It's a simple chemical process well known around the world for quite some time. However, in some countries it's still considered an innovation, so the technology has already been invented, studied, validated, and laboratory tests have been conducted. But the technology itself is just sitting there. At the very beginning, at its inception, it's simply waiting for the moment when it will finally be rolled out to the whole world, and then we will be living in a society of a completely different level.
It seems like some kind of magic, but in reality it's just physics and chemistry.
Yes.
You say that photocatalysis doesn't get used up, so it turns out that it's actually an eternal force, essentially a perpetual natural solution to the problem.
Yes, the titanium dioxide itself, which participates in the reaction, it doesn't get consumed, meaning it only gets activated as a catalyst, but it works in the chemical reaction. So for example, if we add it to concrete, into the concrete mix, it will keep working indefinitely for as long as the product lasts. Of course, that's if it stays clean, if it doesn't get painted over from above with another paint or some kind of film so that there is direct interaction between the surface and the light, then it will all work.
Please tell us, what do people typically say when they use this on buildings, on facades? What results do they usually get? How do they usually respond?
Actually, the feedback is very interesting. There are applications, for example, in Europe, roof tiles with added titanium dioxide are popular because there are problems with moss and mold forming on roofs, and it's very difficult to clean. But this simple technology allows you to get rid of that organic matter right away, and as a result, the roofs stay clean all the time. There's a very interesting example that colleagues from Belarus told me about. One of the engineers who works with air purification devices had a neighbor whose apartment caught fire, and the smell of burning spread throughout the entire floor into all the apartments. And this acrid smell is almost impossible to get rid of by any means. The engineer's wife immediately developed an allergy, and they simply couldn't physically stay overnight in their apartment. So he brought in an experimental prototype. While still at that company, he brought the device home. It was a photocatalytic air purifier. So here's what happened. Within a day, the smell of burning completely disappeared from the apartment. After the device had been running, and within a week, the smell was gone from the entire floor. That's it. At the moment, I don't know of any other solutions in the world that can work as effectively.
So photocatalysis can be used even after fires. It turns out it works in swimming pools and with food as well. Where else? What other areas of application are there?
Yes, using it in swimming pools is also an interesting development. There are special liquids based on photocatalysis that we add to the pool. We can add it to a pond, for example, where we raise fish, and we need to clean the water from excess microorganisms, or in a swimming pool. So we get endlessly clean water as long as we don't change it. Without chlorine, without peroxide, without any absolutely unnecessary chemicals that could be harmful to us.
That's great. And what about food? Is there anything related to food? It can be used in medicine too, as far as I remember.
Yes, in medicine. Many medical centers use such air purification devices and coatings because they kill almost all or nearly 99% of all possible harmful bacteria. When surgical operations are performed, if a patient dies, in most cases it's not because of a surgeon's mistake, but because of an infection that develops after the operation has been completed. It gets into the wound, and that's what leads to a fatal outcome. So, if a patient is situated in a completely sterile and controlled environment, the chances of survival, in fact, almost double after such serious and complex operations. As for food products, this technology is used in food processing. That is, surfaces, cutting boards, and refrigeration chambers are coated with it. And then food products are stored for longer. So roughly speaking, for example, we have some poultry meat that can be stored for 7 days, let's say, in the refrigerator. If it is processed on a special antibacterial surface and stored in refrigerators with this antibacterial environment, it can be kept for up to 2 weeks. At the same time, there is no need to add any concentrates, carcinogens, or anything else that is harmful to health. So
it's environmentally friendly.
An environmentally friendly approach.
So what makes this technology is truly unique, and in general exactly what is EraOxygen promoting?
I don't know of any other technologies in the world right now at this point in time that have such a set of functions. That is, it purifies the air from nitrogen oxides, carbon, and all other pollutants. It has an antibacterial effect. It removes allergens. It has anti-mold and antibacterial effects, and also works against fungi. So as a result, mold does not form on the surface. It also eliminates any odors. This means it can even be used in hookah lounges to purify the air. And of course, it produces oxygen itself, plus it creates an antibacterial surface. This is the hydrophilicity of the surface, that is, water does not remain on the surface. A self-cleaning process takes place. If, for example, we imagine that a city decides to use this everywhere, covering building facades, glass, sidewalks with this surface, then it would be possible to lower the city's temperature by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius based on calculations that the urban heat island effect is reduced. As is well known, temperatures in cities are higher than outside the city because of a large amount of air pollution and surfaces that heat up and don't have time to cool down. This creates the urban heat island effect. Because of this, humidity is higher in the evenings as well. So this technology can likewise address these issues too.
Yes, exactly, and it can be used in public places, such as, for example, even at train stations. There are different numbers of people there with varying degrees of proximity between people. Exactly. For example, in Italy, this is used in public transportation. Roofs and handrails are treated. And there are special sensors installed to measure air quality. And the air quality is always at the lowest possible level. So Italy is already developing this at such a level on a public
mass scale. Yes, if we look at the photocatalysis market overall, Asia holds the leading position. Asia is the first to adopt these technologies. Europe is in second place and America is third. For now, in Middle Eastern countries, these are still emerging technologies, but I really hope that soon it will become part of everyday life and simply become the norm.
Yes, I definitely want every country to implement this important measure because for large cities, both in Russia and in other countries around the world, this is truly something that every single person genuinely needs in their daily lives. But this brings us to the important question. Why do you think that clean air is already considered a premium lifestyle or a luxury that not everyone can easily access?
We don't drink dirty water, right? We don't drink dirty water from a puddle. We don't always drink tap water, do we? When we need safe water, we usually use clean filters to purify it, or we buy bottled water from stores, right? Prepared, specially purified water. But we drink 2 liters of water a day. But we breathe air 24/7. We can't stop breathing. The quality of the air we breathe directly and significantly affects the quality of our lives. And it's impossible to have a truly high standard of living. A life where you have ambitious goals, you're full of energy, and you have the resources to achieve them. But if you breathe bad air, you won't have energy, you simply won't have the physical health to make all of that happen. Sooner or later, even if everything is fine at first, sooner or later it will catch up with you anyway. This leads to dire consequences. That's why, essentially, it's the fundamental environment for well-being.
Why do you think we've gone so long without noticing what we're breathing? It seems to all of us, well, we're breathing somehow, we're living just fine.
Well, in general, we often get used to smells, any kind, including the scent of perfume. You put on perfume and after half an hour you don't smell it anymore. You walk into a room with a certain smell and you notice it, but after 10 to 15 minutes you don't sense it anymore. It's the same with us. We breathe air every single day, and we all understand exactly what clean, fresh air is supposed to be like. Every person, regardless of where they live, has an internal sense or understanding of what clean air truly is, a truly pure sensation. But we only feel it when we find ourselves in an environment with clean air, really. But as long as we just breathe the air that's around us every day, and we don't even think that it could be different.
So, EraOxygen, your company is not just a well-established brand, it's already a philosophy in itself. How would you describe, as you see it, the image of this company?
It's like a medical professional, a doctor, who really helps you make your life better, who truly cares about you.
Tell me, please, are you truly, genuinely inspired by the idea that you can really influence entire cities by lowering the temperature, by purifying the air? How do you actually feel about that? How do you feel it?
There's this kind of gradation. There are people who are just leaders, and there are leaders squared, and there are leaders cubed. Leaders cubed are the strongest leaders, those who constantly need scale, who need a larger sphere of influence to improve the lives of a great number of people. I consider myself one of those people. I'll let you in on a little secret. Even when I moved to the Emirates, I actually wrote a book. It's called Urban Shift. It's about the new structure of new cities. It's about how cities, especially the most modern ones, can collaborate with each other and adopt the best technologies from other cities. For example, one city has an effective waste management system. Okay? Another city has successfully implemented a good transportation system. A third city excels in environmental practices. They can exchange these technologies among themselves, thereby creating the very environment for living. And my book is dedicated to all these technologies. What kinds of technologies can be implemented in different areas of city life? I hope that this book will be published soon.
Yes, I would truly love to hold it in my hands, take a careful look, read it and study it because it's a different perspective, a genuinely fresh and insightful take on the topic of ecology. And in general, even though the topic of ecology doesn't come up very often for us and may not seem as important right now, in reality, it's our future.
Yes, ecology is our future. But my book isn't just about ecology. It's really about the future as a whole. I'm a visionary by nature, a strong visionary, and I can see what the future will be like in 50 years, in 100 years, in 200 years, what people will be interested in, what will matter, what will be fascinating. Of course, the book doesn't look that far ahead, but still, when it comes to the near future, there are definitely things that modern cities need, those very technologies that already exist, that are already available, and can already be put to use. Tell me, what does the ideal city look like to you? What does it smell like? What is the air like there? What happens there? Well, we're used to living in these concrete jungles, where from Monday to Friday we work, we're in our cars, surrounded by glass and concrete, and on the weekends we go out somewhere into nature to relax. But why can't we connect with nature right during the week? Why can't we just get up in the morning, open the window like this, and breathe in for a moment clean air? Say, yes, good morning, planet. I'm so grateful and happy I woke up today. And with this positive mood, this positive attitude, go about your day and do your things throughout your day. Make some new discoveries and strive for something. That would be a completely different mindset.
How hard is it to be a woman in the field of innovative technologies? And do you have to prove that you're not just there for a pretty idea?
Actually, in general, being a specialist in photocatalysis is quite difficult because there aren't that many people like that in the world. And when I talk to colleagues who are professionals in this field, it's just a real pleasure for me to talk with them. It doesn't even matter what the outcome of the meeting will be. Maybe we won't agree on anything at all or even understand each other. That doesn't matter. I get a real buzz from the process. When you speak the same language with someone, they understand you, you just pick up on each other's thoughts and these ideas. You both see things the same way, how it all works, and that's just pure enjoyment. And regarding how this is perceived in society, of course, there are challenges because, generally speaking, building materials are considered a male-dominated field. But still, ecology is seen as a female domain. And when you combine construction technologies and ecology, all in one collaboration, it becomes easier. By the way, for example, the Minister of Climate and Natural Resources of the United Arab Emirates is a woman, and I personally greatly admire her work and her ambitions. And new environmental laws are being introduced, which I really like, because they are aimed specifically at the well-being of people. It's clear that the government cares about its citizens. That's why I think the times are definitely changing more and more so, Women are leaving their mark on history. That's why I have hope that, especially after this podcast, the world will become just a little bit more compassionate and a little more attentive and considerate to women.
So tell us, how do you plan to scale this technology? Do you want this technology to be in every home and in what form?
Right now, I'm actually working closely together with many different manufacturers from all around the world: Japan, Denmark, Germany, the Czech Republic, Belarus, Russia, and Canada. Each one is good in their own way. But overall, if we look at the future of the Emirates, I would set up local production there. First, local production of the finished product itself, that is, the coating, and then eventually the production of titanium dioxide itself. This special nanomodular form, because for a country to confidently use a certain technology, it shouldn't depend on imports from other countries. This is essentially the country's security. If we're talking about such important technologies that change people's lives, they should be under state control, and there should be local production. That's why I would still focus on establishing local manufacturing in the future. After all, Dubai is a hub for technologies from all over the world. It's precisely from there that you can influence the entire Middle East at the very least, and even the whole world.
Yes, I absolutely know that in Dubai, they are really always striving to have the very best of everything.
They use the most advanced technologies there, that's true.
I believe that you will succeed and this production will get off the ground. And in principle, I always talk about other countries, about how I wish they could also be on the same level and compete, so that each country strives to be better, and so that things are good for people everywhere. So, what turns out to be the most important and the most difficult thing? Is it more difficult to convince people that there is such an eco-friendly technology? Or is it harder to get people to even start thinking about the fact that our air isn't as clean as it might seem? Or at least to get them to think about our air at all?
Well, when do we go to the pharmacy for medicine? When we have a problem, it's the same thing. As long as a person doesn't have a specific problem or pain, they won't look for a solution because they're already living well enough. But when someone develops an allergy, or their child does, or there are frequent illnesses, viruses, mold on the walls, then they start looking for a solution, because living like that is uncomfortable, because we live in a modern world and we understand that there must be solutions to these problems. And then, of course, people turn to this technology. But there is another way. You can anticipate this in advance and say, yes, we know that these things happen. But from the start, we want everything to be good. We want clean air, for everyone to be healthy, for there to be no mold, and for the expensive renovations we do in our apartments not to be ruined. In 6 months, you already have to repaint the walls after that renovation. Well, maybe not in 6 months, but even in 3 years. With high humidity, you still can't avoid it. But you just apply a coating on top and you simply honestly just forget that you even had this problem in the first place. You treat the air conditioner filters or install a special photocatalytic filter there. And you forget that all those molds and bacteria that cause dirty air can live in these air conditioners. Just do it once and forget about it. And this is basically the simplest option, rather than running for medicine to deal with the problem.
Yes, we always change them. We change the filters in cars every year, for example, in air conditioners, home air conditioners, and you can really feel it when you turn it on after winter. And then it starts. You begin to sneeze, cough, all these micro. Some people forget to change their filters. Of course, you want to just set it up once and forget about it. And that would be easier. So tell me, if you, for example, met a sheikh and had 30 seconds to convince him to invest in your idea, what would you say?
I would simply offer him a choice. What kind of world does he want his children and grandchildren to live in? A world where this technology doesn't exist, or a world where this technology is used? These are two completely different worlds. And here, the choice is obvious.
Yes, children are our future, and it's very important to us what we leave behind. Well, tell me, probably the most important question, what do you dream about and how do you see, in general, the future in 10 years? And what, in principle, will remain after the era of EraOxygen in the future?
Well, that's a very good question, because by the level of a person's dreams, by what someone dreams about, you can generally judge the person as a whole. There's this standard thing, like, I want an apartment, a car, and so on. Those are all basic needs. As for me, I have one dream, one wonderful, a global project. It's a forest project. It's not just a forest. It's a forest that can be built in the middle of a desert, in the middle of concrete jungles. In any environment, yes, even in Antarctica, if you like. What's the essence? The forest consists of artificial trees. There are very good, high-quality artificial trees. They have natural-looking bark, and the foliage and the trees themselves are fire-resistant and do not fade over time. And these trees are coated with a photocatalytic compound, which is a special coating. And when you walk through a forest made of such trees, you breathe truly clean, fresh air, just like you would in a real pine forest. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And moreover, for example, if we take 1,500 of these trees, say 1 hectare of forest, in principle, 1,500 trees is enough for a dense planting. These 1,500 trees will work like 17,000 real trees in terms of air purification and oxygen production. And so I have this idea to create such a photocatalytic, the world's first photocatalytic forest. I have this idea, I've already patented it, there's a certificate for this idea, and I sincerely and truly dream that one day this idea will come to life. Then I'll really feel that I didn't live in vain.
That the mission is accomplished. But it turns out this is the dream of any big city. To make it greener, take Moscow, for example. Or Dubai, where it's all concrete jungles and everyone is fighting for every patch where there can be more greenery.
Absolutely. But for example, in places where plants and trees are able to live and thrive independently, Europe, Russia, Japan, the USA, you plant a tree, it grows by itself, and there are many types of trees that can thrive. But if we look at areas where vegetation is a problem due to the climate, hot countries, deserts, you can't just bring any tree there, plant it, and expect it to grow. No. It takes a huge amount of work, daily effort watering for the trees to grow. And even then, there's no guarantee they'll grow. Only certain types of trees can survive there. And to talk about having a coniferous forest in the desert, well, that's science fiction. It's on the verge of fantasy. But with artificial trees and my photocatalysis technology, that's a reality.
That's really interesting. I hope we'll be able to walk through that forest soon. Yes.
I'll definitely invite you there.
Great.
My daughter has a laptop at school that she uses for studying, especially for her classes. And I put a small sticker on that laptop while she is at school. There's an Italian company that makes photocatalytic films. They work indoors. I placed it carefully on her laptop so that every single time she was near it, the air surrounding her would be thoroughly purified. So she went on vacation to Russia for a while, and when she eventually came back, she actually had a runny nose and was in a sort of pre-cold state, almost like she was about to get sick. She was like, well, that's it. I need to take some meaningful action, rinse my nose, maybe take her to the sea, to swim, to bathe. But for example, here this laptop goes to school even though she's still sniffling a bit. I was even thinking maybe she shouldn't go to school. And after she spent time next to this laptop, she comes home and there's no more runny nose. And the next day, and the day after that, it's still gone. So basically, the time she spent with this laptop, the air got purified. The bacteria in the air were reduced below the critical level that makes a person sick. And that's it. She recovered. This is the clearest example of how simply and easily this works.
So it turns out you actually need a few hours?
Basically, yes. If, for example, we have an air purifier, a catalytic one, then it only takes 20 minutes to completely clear a room of the COVID virus. Or, for example, if someone is smoking in the room, 20 minutes and there will be no cigarette smell. It'll be as if it was never there at all.
Well, the COVID virus was a really huge problem for the population, and even those with a strong immune system still got infected because they were around others, because everyone was sick. And if back then...
Yes, at that moment it was really such a surge, a boom in technology. Everyone, whether they knew about it or not, whether they understood it or not, they all jumped into it. For example, before COVID, there were maybe 3 companies in Russia making photocatalytic air purifiers. But during COVID, that number grew to 120. But not all photocatalysis is the same, because titanium dioxide has 3 molecular forms. only the anatase form is active. And it's specifically the anatase form with a special composition and so on. And you need to select the right compositions. So what happened during the hype? Yes, most of these devices were fakes because people heard something somewhere, and then there's this rare raw material that needs to be extracted in a special way to obtain it. It's not popular worldwide. You can't just go to a store and buy it. So those were just fakes. They would stick a logo on it and sell it, but it didn't work. So to actually work with this, you really need to have good, reliable, and certified products for it to actually work properly and as intended.
So you just need to understand and basically
Know what you're doing.
know what you're doing, yes.
Are there any, visual tests to check if it actually works, for example? Absolutely, yes. There are air quality sensors that can accurately measure the air quality before and after. You can regularly monitor the air quality in your home. There's an app for your smartphone. But for a clear example, I really like the Italian test. It uses the catalyst, specifically rhodamine B as a catalyst. It's called rhodamine B. It reacts to acidic and alkaline environments. For example, concrete is inherently alkaline, and this rhodamine B is a dye of a very bright magenta color. We apply it to the concrete. If the concrete has photocatalytic properties, we expose it to ultraviolet light or take it out into the sun. And as soon as the oxidation reaction starts, because the production of oxygen is an oxidation reaction, rhodamine B immediately becomes lighter. That is, it can actually become almost completely transparent. This is a sign that the powerful oxidation reaction is taking place. Oxidation reactions work on the same principle. For example, that's how oxygen-based bleaches work for us. That's also oxygen. And the same thing happens here. And this test very clearly and very quickly shows whether it works or not.
Please tell us, in Russia, I know there are already applications. At which site? How did it happen? And what is the situation there now?
Yes, that's really the case. Actually, I was the one who personally initiated making things in Russia, the first photocatalytic improvement project. It's a sidewalk that leads to the Children's Leisure and Creativity Center. Who else should we try for, if not for the children themselves? At our own expense, our company constructed this sidewalk to clearly demonstrate to the administration, the city, and the government that yes, it works, it truly exists. And when we were building it, it was in November or perhaps even December, when the weather was already turning cold. It was November, all mud, constant rain, and of course a white surface. Everything was covered in all these tracks. Mud. We were preparing for the official opening, but it didn't happen because important people, VIPs, didn't come to the opening. And then, as spring arrived, I came to this site, and two things immediately struck me. First of all, the surface was clean, almost like new, considering that a large number of children walk on it every day. And kids mean all sorts of chocolate bars, cola, all kinds of little things, and so on. So the chances of the surface staying clean are practically zero. That's one. But it was clean. It cleaned itself because it was spring, the spring sun. And it's like new again. That's one. And secondly, I was standing on this path. This is the city center. There's a parking lot here, a parking lot there, and another one over there. There are major traffic interchanges all around. But as I stood there, I felt as if I was in the middle of a pine forest. It was just powerful. Then people started coming to this site. My colleagues from South Ural University who have defended their dissertations and doctorates on the topic of photocatalysis, they specifically came to this site to see how it actually works. Because laboratory tests are one thing, but when you have a real existing site, it's something completely different. And they were amazed too. They were impressed. They said, "Can we pry a tile out from this site?" I said, "Well, yes, there are some like that in the warehouse. We can just give you one. No need to dig up the walkway." So in general, and this experience shows that this genuinely exists in our everyday reality. In fact, it's not a spaceship. These are ordinary, real, and practical technologies that can be part of our lives, that can exist as a normal, everyday part of life. Why not, right?
Yes, absolutely. So let's break it down like this. If I am living at home, specifically in an apartment setting, what would you suggest? Where, in particular, should these items or features ideally be used in an apartment for an average family? Starting from wall renovations, improvements or upgrades, and honestly, I don't know, do we even need an air conditioner now? What elements would you personally recommend for a typical everyday family?
I would definitely treat all elements and components related to air conditioning systems and air purification devices with this compound, because those are the main sources of bacteria, dirt, and mold in indoor environments. That's the first thing. Secondly, I would treat all possible surfaces and areas that could later be affected by mold or fungi in order to protect those surfaces and prevent any future growth. That's the second thing. Thirdly, or rather the third point, is the hospitality area. Our living room, where we receive guests, is the space where it should always be clean. It's kind of the home standard of quality. If this space, if it matches the latest trends, if it's spotlessly clean and completely safe, if the homeowner can provide this, even if it's subtle, but still offers genuine protection and care for the guests, that's truly valuable. That's a truly genuine expression of hospitality, much more so than certain formal gestures that might sometimes be performed simply to show off, as if to say, look what I can do. And then there's something else, a completely invisible, yet deeply meaningful kind of protection, one that is not seen but is always present. But it's actually much more important, especially when you have that underlying sense of basic safety and comfort in such welcoming spaces. And then you need to look further, depending on the needs. For example, it could involve working with the kitchen, so that, for instance, there are no lingering smells after cooking, so they don't spread throughout the house. It could also mean treating children's rooms so that the child is in an environment with constantly clean oxygen, where it's easy to breathe, and so they don't get sick. So it's all based on specific requests. There are also mosquito nets, for example, photocatalytic ones. They're actually golden in color, very beautiful. They not only keep insects out, but also act as anti-dust screens. And at the same time, sunlight shines on them and immediately clean air enters your home.
Perfect.
Perfect. And most importantly, it all works. You don't need any electricity for this technology to work. All you need is light. Of course, if you put this in a basement and keep the basement closed, never turning on the light, if there's never any light there, then it won't work. If there's light, that's all you need.
Yes, after all, every house has electricity, so every house has light, and it turns out that this also works with artificial lighting.
Yes, and as for the Emirates in particular, there is very strong and significant solar energy resources available there. It can be used precisely for the benefit and well-being of people.
It's very intense there. And as far as I know, even in winter when it rains, which is rare, it's still present.
Yes, the sun is always there, and that's a blessing. That's what I think.
Maria, this is a really interesting conversation we're having. I still want to ask you a few quick questions, rapid-fire questions. Answer briefly. Say the first thing that comes to mind. What is cleanliness?
Freshness.
What is something your day can't start without?
Exercise.
What makes you truly strong?
Faith.
Which light do you slightly prefer, morning or evening?
Morning, of course.
One word perhaps that best describes your mission.
Light.
What would you say to people who have doubts?
Try it for yourself.
Maria, thank you so much for being with us today. We truly appreciate your presence. Thank you for bringing back into our lives what seems like a forgotten luxury, breathing clean, fresh air.
Thank you, that's truly balm for my soul. I'm very glad we had such a useful and meaningful conversation today. I think we'll meet again more than once. As soon as the forest opens, I'll definitely invite you there.
Thank you, we'll all be waiting. And that's it for Clean Air. We're going after new technologies, eco-friendly new technologies in our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
When you listen to Maria, you start to look at air differently. Not as something ordinary, but as a living space that holds us, nourishes us, and connects us. Clean air isn't just about ecology, it's about taking care of yourself. It's about a home where you feel at peace, about a city where you don't feel like running away. It's simply a life where technology doesn't interfere with nature, but helps it to be itself. When we purify the air, we purify everything around us: water, walls, thoughts, relationships. And the oxygen era reminds us that comfort isn't just about air conditioners and filters. It's truly that feeling when you can simply take a deep breath and know that everything is really all right. Thank you to Maria for bringing back into our lives the simple yet often forgotten wonderful luxury of breathing fresh, clean air.